Okay, welcome back. The last time we learned how to position our objects in our scene. So this time around, we're going to create. What we're going to do is to create image textures and also add some sort of materials to our objects in our scene. So now I have here two boxes. One which is light blue and also brown. So you can see from here, I have the light blue box and also the brown box. Let me move around so you see what I mean. So this is the object. So I'm just going around the object. So you can see I have two boxes, a light blue and a brown, a brown box. So these are the two objects that we're going to use. Now let me refresh these pages again. Now what I mean to say, these are A boxes, and I want to convert these A boxes into rooms. Just like in your room looks more like a cube, where you can find yourself, like how I'm seated in a room. So I'm going to convert these two boxes in a room. By default, these are their colors. So from here, when I hover over this, you can see the color of the first box, which is light blue, and the color of the second box, which is also brown. This is light blue. Now what I want to do is, now let's try and create two types of rooms. One which is going to be a metallic room and the other which is going to be a brick room. So the brown one, we're going to use a brick, and for this one, we're going to use some sort of metal, more like a metal container kind of room that we will create here. So with these done, so you can see I have the width of this particular box is the width, height, and the depth is 444, as you can see here. And the same way, this also has the 444. And I told you in meters, then the dimensions that you see here are in meters. So when you are creating objects, you should be mindful. So personally, I'm somewhere around 1.84 meters. So just imagine if you create a box which is 4, it means personally I can fit into this particular box. And so that should tell you that when you are creating objects in the 3D environment, make sure your dimensions are set right, so that when you wear the headgear, you don't feel disoriented in the environments that you find yourself in the 3D world. Now the position, because by default I said all the objects inherently come out at a position of 0, 0, 0, but I just want the object to be seen. So from away from the camera, by default the camera is somewhere 0, 0, 0. So but we are seeing this object because it's projecting to it. If I still refresh the page, so you can see these objects are still, this object is still there. So, and I'm going around the objects, as you can see. So that is about the same thing. So you can see all of these objects. So these are cubes. Now, how do we add some sort of texture and material to our objects? So what I did was I first of all created this text mat, which is a new document with all the important information in here. And that is how come we have this object. So to add textures to objects, you can visit this website, which is called texture.com. And over here, you get a chance to create to add as many textures as possible to your objects that you see. So I was looking for a metal. So these are metal surfaces that are available. You can sign up and download a maximum of 15 images within a day. So the following day, you can download as many as 15. I'm going to load the textures that I'm going to use for this one online. And also from here, you can also see that I have a folder called texture. So these are the texture that I'm going to use for this practical exercise are all going to be found in here. So I would upload it online for you to download and also apply to your work. So you come out with something similar to what I have. All right, so now let's delve into today's activity. So I now have my object. So how do we convert this object into add a texture or material to this particular object? So to do that, we first of all would have to create something we call asset management system. And the reason is, just like the JavaScript that we have here, our page reference the JavaScript, and we don't need to type it over and over again. Anytime we reference the JavaScript, it brings in the content of the JavaScript, our A-frame JavaScript, into our work and also proceed with displaying the information to us. So in this case, we have to also create something we call the asset management. And of course, that should also fall within the AC. So once we have an asset management system, we can always call on those objects that are found within the asset management without having to create them over and over again. All right, so I'm going to create the asset management system by, of course, I'm going to use my, start with this. So I'll call it asset management. So system. So that is going to hold all the images that I'm going to use to create the object that I have in here. So all the images I'll use to create these objects, I'm going to put all of them in here. So within that, you can see I've placed my asset management within the scene, and I'll reference it one at a time. So we use what we call A assets, and A assets in this time round we have the image tag, just like how you already reference images and the rest in HTML. So in the same way, you can also have an image, and the source is going to be the location of that particular image, the images that we want onto our objects, or we want to apply on our objects. So in this case, the source that I have in here is going to be of it's found in the textures folder. So you can see I have the textures folder, sorry. I have the textures folder, and within it, there are so many images that are available. I'm going to select one that I downloaded from texture.com. So the first one was the metal plate, so I'm going to use this one. This one. And of course, I will give it an ID, which I'll probably call it maybe metal. I'm going to call it maybe metal plate. So metal plate. The alternate text, we can choose to just forget about it. So that is about adding one image into it. Now let's add another image. This time around, what we're going to include is a brick. I said we are creating a container with a metal container room and also a brick room. So this time around, I'm going to use also texture, also from texture.com. This time around, I'm going to pick up maybe this brick to apply to my objects. And this time around, I'm going to also give this an ID of maybe brick. All right, I'll forget about the alternate text as alternate attribute that we have in here. So now I have these two assets created. So now it should be very easy for me to call these assets in my light blue box to apply the texture within the texture that you saw in the metal plate. I can now apply it to this to make it look more like a metal container. So how do I add that? So first of all, wherever we are from here, we have the objects to be blue. So this time around, I'm going to add an SRC, which is the source of the image that we already have. It is found within the what do you call it? The textures. Yes, so it is found within the texture folder And within that texture folder, I have the objects, and which was called, I have the objects which I call, let me see. This is a metal plate. The texture.com. This time round, I look out for the metal plate, which is this one, metal plates new. So you can see metal plates new 14. So that is it. All right. So I have this particular object now attached to my image. If I let me reorganize this to make it easier for you to see, for all the text to be on the same line, so you appreciate what is really happening. Let me reduce this. All right, so from here you can see now the metal plate has now been added to this. So if I should move around this object, if I can move around this object, you can see we have the metal plates or the metal texture applied to the object that we see in here. Let me go back again so you can see I'll refresh it. Then that is the metal that we have added. So now let's try and also add the brick to it. So that is one way of doing this. The other way would have been also to call out the object itself, the ID of the object itself. So the ID of the object was metal plates. So when we save that, you can see the metal plate is still there. If I should add maybe an S to it, or now refresh the page, you can see the object metal plate is now gone. So I don't need to always now create a source to reference the lengthy source that we have here. I can just give it an ID and call the ID at the source to apply to my object. So in the same way, maybe you can pause and also do this particular one by adding an object, making this one look more like a brick. All right, so you can pause and create your own, but so I'm going to do it right away from here. So of course I'm going to add a source, and because I called mine break from here, the ID is called break. I would reference it by the hashtag and call it break. So you can see the break. This is the image of the breaks that is available in my work. So if I should also move around this object, you can see it looks more like the break that we saw previously in our scene. So let me refresh the page so we have the objects aligned in here. Of course, I can change the type of break also here. So this time around with the asset manager or management system, you can make a change here and it affects all the information that you put in here. So let me change this object, probably choose a different break. So texture, still on texture.com. So the break rounded break, I can even add, let me change to break 6. So when I save this one, you can see the break has changed to the previous, to a new one, which is quite different from what we saw earlier. All right. I'll go back again to the previous one, which is this break. So this is one way of adding texture or material to our object. So for instance, if I want to add maybe a design, any kind of design to the object that I create, I can always add that design to it. So that is one way of doing this. There are other properties that you can add to this object. So for instance, we can also try to change the roughness, the roughness of our plates or of our objects. So in this case, you can look at it and see what is going on behind the scenes. So if I change the roughness to 0. Probably 8, can see you see a little difference in what is how rough the object is. So for instance, 9, it changes a little. Let me change it to maybe I'm sure you can see something. The maximum is 1, so I'm sure you can see how the roughness, it changes a little. A little is quite subtle, so you might not really experience it. So from 0, you can see the object. The moment I type 0.5, you can see it changes a little. That is, the roughness makes it looks more real. And of course, I can also add some sort of roughness to also this particular object too over here. So I can also include a roughness to this one. Which is also, let me make it probably 0.9. So that is quite a little different as compared to the other ones. So at this point, you know how to create textures and also materials. So in creating textures, you can just call on the attributes or components that you need, color, SRC, and all of that. You can call on them directly and use it in your objects. But for material, of course, you have to use the component material and attach each of these properties, the respective properties that you want to add properties that you think would have to be part of the material. You add all of them within the material component, as you see over here. So this brings us to how textures and also materials are added to objects. Of course, if you have the reason for the asset management, any object or picture or anything that you want to add to your objects that you think you would be referencing over and over again, it's always advisable to have them in the asset management system by creating an asset and putting each of them in there and giving it respective IDs. So in that case, you just call on the IDs to reference the objects as you see in here.